Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here every week working at simplifying things in our lives, one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and this episode is all about the absolute, in my humble opinion, most amazing way to preserve your food. Fermentation is, in fact, the only food preservation method that actually not only doesn't take away nutrients from your food, but actually adds nutrients to your food as it's preserving. Did you know that if you're canning your food, you can lose up to 50% of the nutrients? So there are actually 4 ways of preserving food that I use a lot, some of them interchangeably even, and none of those 4 ways involve canning. There are a couple things that I will occasionally can, but I kid you not, I get the canning supplies out like twice a decade. I don't like canning for a lot of reasons, but I really love preserving food. So if you go to solelyrested.com/preserve, I have for you there all the tools that I use for all these food preservation methods and some other special things linked there, including the amazing book that we are just scratching the surface on in this episode today. And I also link to a workshop that I actually just released in the Wellness Collective, which is part of the Hive that I am part of, 22 experts in their fields bringing you encouragement, tips, tricks, and education in the world of real food, simple living, homesteading, all the good stuff. So please, if you go to solelyrested.com/preserve, take a second and find out about the Wellness Collective, the amazing things going on over there in the Hive, and check into this workshop that I just released. You can actually, if you're catching this episode before the end of August, you can actually even have access to the workshop totally for free. So go check it out, solelyrested.com/preserve. Now, today, I'm really excited about our guest. If you are at all confused about how to ferment so that you can truly enjoy the taste of it, I know that's a big hang up for a lot of people. Like, well, it tastes weird. This episode is for you because it doesn't have to taste weird. If you are hung up on, well, how do you eat the food after it's fermented? Like, what do you do with it? How do you use it? Oh, this episode is for you. If you're always questioning, well, how do you know when the ferment is done? Or how do you know if it's okay? Sometimes ferments look really weird. This episode is for you. Kirsten K. Shocke is the author of the best-selling book, Fermented Vegetables, along with so many other award-winning books, guys. She's going to get you excited about fermenting. She's going to show you how to use fermented foods as nutritious, convenient ingredients in your cooking, while she's also going to be busting myths and overcoming hesitations around this tried and true ancient way of preserving food that really, in my opinion, should absolutely be included in every modern kitchen. This episode is going to give you valuable insights and encouragement to start your own fermentation journey. Or if you're like me, you've been fermenting for years, this episode is going to give you new ideas and new inspiration. You're going to love this episode. Let me tell you, before we bring her on, a little bit more about Kirsten. She's the author of the award-winning Homebrewed Vinegar, co-author with Kirsten Shockey. She's the author of the award-winning The Big Book of Cider Making, the award-winning Fiery Ferments, and the best-selling Fermented Vegetables, which is now, by the way, in its 10th anniversary edition. I love it. There's new techniques like how to turn ferments into seasoning pastes and powders. There are 65 new recipes in the 10th anniversary edition that weren't in the first book. And all the science of gut health over the last decade is included now in this book. Seriously, go to solelyrested.com/preserve and get yourself a copy. But Kirsten can be found writing about life and fermentation at fermentingchange.substack from her home in the mountains of Southern Oregon. She's the co-founder of the Fermentation School, which is a woman-owned and woman-led benefits corporation supporting the voices of independent educators to empower learning and build culture. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we dive in, I want to tell you one place to go to find a whole lot of really cool things that you guys are often asking me about over on Instagram or on YouTube videos. I have fermenting springs that you're always asking, what am I doing with those? And I have 2 different kinds of lids. I cannot imagine bulk food storage without these fantastic lids that truly keep your food safe from the rodents and fresh. Great lids. And my tea strainer that I use in my mason jar, you guys are always asking me to find out more about that. And whenever I talk about sprouting, all the sprouting things that I get, the seeds, the trays, everything, I get them here, True Leaf Market. And I have a special code for you guys. Don't miss this code. It's very limited time, and it's not often that I have something like this. Go to soulyrested.com/cover, COVER. And there you will find the True Leaf cover crops that I love, as well as all these things I just mentioned, and that sweet savings code, soulyrested.com/cover. Don't miss out, guys. Well, Kirsten, I'm so excited that you could be with us today because your book, Fermented Vegetables, Creative Recipes for Fermenting 72 Vegetables, Fruits, and Herbs, is like seriously blowing me away. I'm just starting to work my way through it, and it might be a lifetime process because there's so many wonderful things to make in there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
So tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. My name's Kirsten Shockey, and I live in the mountains of Southern Oregon. I have a small, or I mean, I guess we still do, but not the way it was when the kids were little, homestead. And, you know, when you start to grow food, you quickly have an abundance of food. And when you have an abundance of food, you quickly need to figure out how to preserve the food. So this property has a bunch of over 100-year-old apple trees. So, that became cider and vinegar early on. And then we got goats and a cow at some point. And so that became cheese making. And I was canning vegetables for a long time before I realized that fermentation is such a much better way to preserve not only the flavor but the nutrition, and wow, so much more energy efficient. Like my energy, the energy from the heat that the stove creates, and just all of
Yes.
it. And so then I ended up starting a tiny farmstead fermentation business where I'd stand at market with my little fermented vegetables, and people would kind of walk up eagerly, and then when they realized it wasn't jams and jellies or whatever, they'd kind of back up.
Right.
That was before these things were even somewhat hip, and so we did that for a few years, and started teaching from there. And I think then I realized that, instead of me schlepping vegetables all over the place and doing the work, it's much easier, and not easier really. The word's better, to empower others to ferment their own vegetables. And so I really enjoyed the teaching, and that's where Fermented Vegetables, that first book, sort of came from. It came from, there was really only one other book out there at that time when the first edition was written. And that was Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz. And, I was actually working on a memoir. I was doing something else entirely. And my husband's
Did you ever write that?
No, I got
you need to get back to it.
I know, that's what everybody's telling me, especially my kids.
Now that everybody knows you as the fermentation queen, they want to know more about you, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we tell a lot of stories in the book, and often people are like, "Hey, those stories! Like, I love the stories. I read the book for the stories." And I'm like, "Okay,
Yes.
I need to remember that." But
Yes.
anyway, my husband's like, "Oh, we should write a book on vegetables because you make so many different things." And I'm like, "Ah, Sandor already did that." He's like,
Hmm.
gets the book from the shelf. He's like, "There's 17 pages on vegetables. I think you have more
Oh,
to say."
wow.
And so, yeah, fast forward to now. I mean, the fermentation literature is huge. It's wonderful. It's great. But yeah, at the time, it was sort of that teaching people locally to ferment was where that came from. And so I can thank all those early students for, asking so many questions.
I love it. I mean, all of us, hundreds of thousands of us who are getting this book out and reading it can thank those previous students because it's great. There's so much there, and I'm sure it's touching so many homes and improving so much gut health around the world. So, thank you. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's super heartwarming. And I mean, as you know, being an author is, well, maybe not as much in the modern world where you're supposed to put yourself out there all the time, but still, it's kind of lonely, and you just don't know what, your little book is out there in places, and,
No.
and you don't know what. Um, but once in a while, people will reach out, and especially when the book first came out, I would get a lot of folks that are like, "Oh my God, I had no idea how to recreate grandma's pickles. I thought the recipe died with her, and now I realize it
Oh,
was it was this." And so
I just got
people
chills.
finding their
Ah,
flavor memories is huge.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
huge thing.
And yeah,
It's
that's a
like
good thing to say, flavor memories, because so much of our memories are built on literally things in the kitchen. It's so true.
mhm, it is,
Mm,
yeah. And smells, and a lot of that's
yeah.
in the kitchen too. So
Yeah. And music.
yeah,
If you're playing music in the kitchen, you've built so many memories right there.
exactly.
But but back to what you said about being an author. Yes, I still remember the first couple days that my book was out there in bookstores. I remember thinking, "Oh my word, I can't take it back." Like, did I really want to put some of the personal things on the pages that I put there, you know? And you're also right. It's very lonely. We have no idea. We just have no idea. So I wanted to make sure I told you that it's definitely impacting our house, and I'm sure a lot of other homes because, like you said, we work really hard. I mean, I can't imagine how many years you've put into your first edition and now your second edition, the 10th anniversary edition. I can't even imagine. I'm sure it's many, many years of effort because there's so much in there and it takes time to pull that all together.
Yeah, I was really thrilled that I was able to do the second edition because um, the first edition, yeah, there was so much in there, but not only traveling the world because that book did so well, and I met so many people, and so the second edition has, not only those first students, but like so many people since then that have taught me. Um, but the other thing is the science behind it all has come, and gut health, around gut health,
Yes.
and what's going on has come so much further. And so it was really kind of fun to be able to do that second edition, and include sort of where the world is,
Yes. I mean, all these are probably things that our grandparents they didn't understand scientifically, but they knew that this fermented food made them feel good, right? And it's so great to now see, even a decade after your first book came out, the difference in what science is now understanding.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
So, from what I understand, I actually looked it up. I found that your 10th anniversary edition has new techniques that the first book didn't have. And it has information about turning ferments into seasoning pastes and powders, 65 new recipes in addition to the old recipes. And like you just said, all the science of gut health over the past decade is now in there too. So, it's fantastic, guys. Make sure you go out after listening to this and find yourself a copy of Fermented Vegetables, the 10th edition. I noticed you even have quiche recipe You have dips and sandwiches and salads. Like, you have legit recipes. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, like you said, grandmom's pickles and how to ferment tomatoes, but you have like the full recipes too.
Yeah, that was again from market. People would often ask, like, what else can I do with these foods besides just stick my fork in there and eat it? And that's a
Yes.
perfectly good thing to do with them. And
Right.
but I think we needed, especially when the first one was written, we needed to come past that sauerkraut goes on a hot dog, and then beyond that, I don't know what to do with it.
Right. Right.
um, and what I do now, I mean, I um, co-founded a fermentation school where I have classes and things like that, and fermentation challenge, and just ways for people to try to engage if they're not a book learner,
Hmm.
and a Substack. But what I do mostly is try to help people not only learn to ferment, but then once they have, learn to eat the foods, because I think it's real. Um, that's There's the step of getting into the kitchen and making your first ferment, right? And then there's the step of, now I have my first ferment. You taste it. Oh, that's good. You put it in your fridge, but you never reach for it because
Yeah.
you don't have, it's not in your habit. It's not in your, how you grew up eating or whatever. And so then helping people kind of make that next leap, which is that this is just an ingredient. Um, it's actually a wonderful convenience food.
Hmm.
If you have, for example, I used to make garlic braids, and then I figured out that if I take all that garlic that has come from my garden and I, run it through the food processor and make a garlic paste and ferment that for the rest of the year, all I
Mm.
have to do is open the fridge, grab that jar, put
Oh,
as much garlic in as I need it. And I don't know about you, but the garlic braids are so pretty, so I always hated to use them. And by the time I did, they were
it's so true.
dried out or growing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And this way, like the rest of the year, if I'm in a hurry or even if I'm not, I don't
Mm.
have to peel a clove of garlic. I
I
have it
love
ready to
that.
go. And so, yeah, so all of the foods, like, even sauerkraut can be used as an ingredient, as something convenient to bring veggies quickly and easily to the table without
Mm.
thinking about it. So that's
I
why
love it.
quiche.
Such a good point. I don't think people ever think of fermenting as convenient food because it's something people think, "Oh, it takes a long time and it's complicated," but it actually makes food more convenient. That's such a good point. I'm glad you made that. And I'm gonna start doing the garlic paste. I've never
Oh yeah,
thought
you
of
are.
that.
And then you'll do it forever.
Forever. Okay, so
Yeah.
Kirsten, here's my biggest problem with ferments though. Do you have a second refrigerator to hold all your ferments? Like, how do you have enough room?
I do. I used to have 3 extra refrigerators.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I
I
tell
don't. I don't anymore. I just have one, and sometimes it gets a little crazy in there. But
yeah,
yeah. But even if you don't, if you have a modern refrigerators are so ridiculously huge, and
yeah.
if you just use that back end that the fresh stuff would get lost and go bad in anyway.
Yes. Yes.
You really don't necessarily need one, and you can still hold so much back there.
I agree, I agree. My only problem is I keep them all typically in half-gallon jars, so it's a little heavy, right? And I gotta move them all around, and when we have a
True.
giant fridge, so it gets a little, I gotta move out the stuff in the front, set it aside, move my jar. So, unfortunately, I hate to admit this, but sometimes I, like, will grab a fresh tomato instead of digging out my fermented tomatoes for my salad because it seems too much of an effort sometimes.
Oh, for
But
sure.
but I know, at least I think, in my experience, there are a few things you can ferment and not refrigerate them.
Actually, if we're just, I mean, we won't go into all the ferments, like, miso, you never need to really refrigerate and all
Mm,
of that, but let's stick with vegetables.
yeah.
All of those vegetables actually don't need refrigeration. And I
Mhm.
was going to actually say that. So I'm glad you
Except it
asked.
changes the taste, right?
But what happens is, yes, they keep fermenting until all the carbohydrates have been consumed by the microbes. At that point, the microbes die off, and it's as long as there's no oxygen in there, they're very stable. I have
Mm.
um, some hot sauces that I've fermented for years and years because as long as you've made sure there's no oxygen in there, like nothing's really happening. It's acidic.
Mm.
It's with hot sauce, you're still getting these wonderful flavor changes as things break down. Um, yeah, so our ancestors, I like to say we're all here because our ancestors successfully fermented vegetables, fermented
Mm.
foods, and they never had the convenience of the refrigerator, which just slows it down, helps
Yeah.
retain the flavor that is that freshest, crispest flavor
Right.
that we
That's true.
like.
They also get more mushy, right? The longer it sits if it's not in the refrigerator. Yeah.
They can, although mushy is also somewhat salt related. So
Oh.
we like to ferment with less salt now because we have salt inundating our diet from
Mhm.
so many of the foods that are out there. Um, but old school fermentation, they used a lot more salt, and the salt hardens the pectins in the cell walls, and that's what keeps it crispy. And so, if you make a sauerkraut or something and right away it's soft, it probably didn't have enough salt in it. It's probably not
Okay.
something that went wrong otherwise.
Good to know.
Yeah,
I
so
was thinking
salt
of
salt
cherry
does a few things.
tomatoes. I was thinking of cherry tomatoes when I said that, and it could also maybe be the variety of tomatoes that I've used in different jars, where I do find I feel like if they've sat in my root cellar longer, they get mushier and they become, flat and the seeds have come out of them versus staying beautiful in my fridge in a beautiful circle of tomato, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
And tomatoes are kind of in a special camp anyway because there's so
Okay.
much sugar and they're soft to begin with. If you want a
Okay.
crispy tomato, you got to use a green tomato, which is just
Yeah.
not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
tomatoes technically are a fruit, and they're a soft vegetable anyway. So you're not going to crisp those up. Um, but yes,
Makes
they,
sense.
they will definitely get mushier.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, you mentioned right in the beginning about the nutrient value. Can you explain that to us, how it compares to canning a jar of vegetables versus fermenting them?
Yeah, sure. So with fermentation, you first, just right out of the bat, you're not canning. You're going for killing all the vegetable. I mean, all the microbes that are on there in order to make sure nothing ferments, or good or
Right.
bad.
Right.
Um, and so, in doing so, you're also losing, vitamin value and texture and all of that. With fermentation, those microbes are consuming the carbohydrates, they're consuming the sugar. So right away, um, you're getting actually a little less sugar in your
Mm.
in your ferment. You're getting digestive enzymes with it. You're getting that nice acid flavor, which helps you digest the rest of your foods that you're eating with them. And instead of losing vitamins, vitamin B12 is now on board. Vitamin C, I think I read, goes up about 16%. So
Mm.
that tomato has a higher vitamin C than the fresh one. Um,
Mm.
and if you're preserving at the peak of flavor and ripeness, if you're getting it from your farmer's market or your garden, you're you're getting that flavor, that ripeness, those vitamins, that nutrient density. You're preserving it as it is at that moment, and then kind of amping it up and making it more bioavailable because it's more digestible, because the microbes have taken care of some of the things that you can't as a human digest. um,
Mm.
you're uptaking those vitamins more, which is amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, I've told people, and you're the one to tell me if I'm right or not, that it's really the only method of preservation that you're increasing your nutrient value.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, freezing, you're holding on to what you're holding on to, depending on how long it's in there. And canning, you've got heat taking things away. But yeah, this one, you're
Yeah. And dehydrating and freeze drying, they maintain almost all the nutrients, but they're not adding
right.
anything. It's crazy. Okay, so you've convinced us how important this really is to know how to ferment because there's so many benefits. But let's break down some of the reasons that people are scared or they just avoid it. One you've already mentioned, the people that would come to your farm table and then back away because it just seems odd, right? Or maybe they've tasted a ferment before and they know it just tasted kind of weird, right? Like, walk us through that fear that people have.
Sure. So we've grown up with germ theory front and center. Don't leave anything out on your counter. So we can just start there with,
Yeah,
the fear people have about leaving things out on their counter. Um, Modern food processing and production kind of threw out fermentation. And, systematically, things like sourdough bread and things that people were making at home were told, 100 years ago or whatever, couple more than that now, but the, those weren't as safe. You need this mass produced bread and it's safer and all that blah blah blah. That marketing
of
has been
course.
with us as long as the modern food processing
Where the
has
money
been.
is where it's safe, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's generations also of um, just being told this isn't safe food. So you've got just all that sort of background noise, right? And then we haven't tasted them. A lot of people haven't because it hasn't been part of their diet, and so the flavors are different,
Mhm.
and not in a bad way, but just not what we're used to. So you get past all that, and then it's like you said, it's the doing. But I like to tell people that nobody in you know nobody's ever been recorded as dying from a properly fermented vegetable. And the
Mhm.
beautiful thing about fermenting a vegetable is if it's bad, if it didn't go well, it will let you know. Um, if you've messed up canning a jar of green beans and there's botulism in there, it's
You don't
hidden,
even
it's
know.
odorless, you do not know. With a fermented vegetable, it's going to smell like your compost pile or
Mm,
worse. It's going
mm,
to be something where you go, oh, that's wrong. And
mm.
there's so many easy ways, with fermented vegetable, it's so simple. If it smells pickly, it tastes acidic, even before you have tasted, if it's got that acidic smell, that smell. And, even if you're not used to eating these things, you will know it. Then it's fine. It's by the time it smells and tastes acidic, it's usually well below 4.6 pH. And that 4.6 pH is the magic number where all those pathogens that we worry about can't grow. And
Mm.
so, for those of you listening that don't understand fermentation, how it works is you've got your vegetable, um, and those microbes, they're all there. They're ready to get going. Um, and all you're doing is sticking them into the right environment for them to thrive. So, in the case of a pickle, you're plunking those pickles down in a nice salty brine. Um, and really, that's all you're doing. The time is the microbes, and the work is the microbes, right? And as they do that, they're lowering the acidity. And as they lower the acidity, the spoilers, the things that would make that cucumber go bad in your refrigerator, can't live in that environment, and so now it's preserved in this acidic, salty liquid. Um, and yeah, by that time, if it's gone bad, you will know. Your pickles will be really gross. Things won't smell right. They won't, it's not confusing. And that's
Mhm.
why it's so safe as well.
I want to pause for a second and update you on my Blue Alpine freeze dryer. I've been using it for a few weeks now, and while the initial reasons I went with Blue Alpine all still ring true, it's a small family business I can get behind, and the food gets dried 25 to 50% faster than the competition. But I now have a few more things to add to my list. I have found out that not only do they build their machines from the ground up in Idaho, they actually have a goal of getting every single part manufactured here in the US. I love that. I also quickly realized that I need many trays to prepare my batches and pre freeze different foods. So I love it that I can use my standard sized large cookie trays. No other machines that I researched allow you to do that. I was also so intimidated the first time I went to use the machine. It was 4 o'clock on a weekday, and I decided to just call customer service. They were fantastic. Such a friendly, knowledgeable guy walked me through everything, and he was just great. So, if you are looking to potentially get a freeze dryer, go check out bluealpinefreezedryers.com and be sure to use code solely rested. Also, on a different note, are you still buying candles at stores like Walmart? Or are you getting those Yankee candles? Like, I'm a big candle girl. I love candles, but guys, I stopped buying those years ago. Please consider doing so. If you're burning candles like that, you are putting endocrine disruptors into your air that you're breathing. And not to mention all the chemicals. The scents themselves are bad for you, but there's other chemicals in there as well. Instead, please take a second to go check out my all time favorite candles. They're made from beeswax. They remove toxins from the air as you're burning them, and there are zero ingredients in there that you can't pronounce. They're really great candles. Go to solelyrested.com/non-toxic, NONTOXIC, to find these candles and some other products I absolutely love around our home as well. So seriously, up your candle game. You will not regret it. Solelyrested.com/non-toxic. Hmm. And if you do take a taste of it and it's gone bad, you'll know instantly, I assume, as well. And you're not going to eat the rest of it, obviously.
Mm-mm. Now, funky flavors where it's a little maybe yeasty or a little bubbly
Hmm.
in your mouth, that's not bad.
Yeah.
And then there's
Yeah. The
always a
calm
pH,
yeast,
right? Oh,
with the
and I
calm
just
yeast
want
will
to,
taste bad, right? If it has the calm, if you don't scrape off the calm yeast, it's going to taste kind of bitter.
it has, yeah, there's does
Yeah.
not add flavor, but it's usually not a problem. The only way calm yeast can be a problem is if it's really been in there for a long time. It only grows on the top. It has to have oxygen. So again, if you've removed oxygen from the process and there's no oxygen um, accessing your ferment when it's in the fridge, that shouldn't grow either.
So I've actually never done that. So pause for a second and walk us through that. Do you do that with every one of your jars of ferment? You'll take the oxygen out with like a special seal kind of pump or top?
I don't have one of those, but a lot of
Okay.
people use those. What I do is it's real old school simplicity, but I um, will ferment even pickles or something that I'm doing in a huge batch. I'll ferment them right in their jars, and um, I keep the lid on tight, and I burp the lid. So as it's fermenting, and sometimes when it's really active, that means I'm walking by a few times a day and opening that lid just a little bit, letting out some of the CO2 and closing it. Or if it's super active, I'll leave that lid slightly open because it's
Hmm.
CO2
Have
is
you ever had
heavier
a
than
jar break?
never with fermented
Never.
vegetables.
Okay.
No. I don't think lactobacillus and the amount of sugar in vegetables can be a problem.
Okay. Because I've had
Bottles,
kombucha jars break
yes,
way too many
bottles with
times.
yeast. It's yeast
Okay.
makes so much more CO2 with sugar. And
Okay.
so, yes, I was just
That
going to
makes
say if
sense.
I've had cider break, I've had kombucha,
Hmm.
all of that, but not vegetables. So you can also leave that lid just slightly ajar if it's, really active and it's ridiculous amount of of burping you have to do. But as that slows down towards the end, then I put it in the fridge and I don't burp it that last time, because CO2 is heavier than oxygen. So every time I'm burping it, I'm pushing out any oxygen that would be in there, right? And the
Huh.
CO2 is what's staying. And so if that last time I don't open it, like especially all the way, and I'm just putting it in the fridge, I really, until I open that jar, don't have any oxygen in there. And those are the jars
Hmm.
also that I can keep, out on the shelf if it's something that I know will be fine, like a hot sauce.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So I've if I've done that with a can of vegetables, a jar of vegetables, and I put it in my root cellar, I open that can to use some of those vegetables, putting the lid back on, then I now have oxygen in there.
exactly. And
So
at
I
that
might,
point, I would put it in your fridge.
okay. Okay.
And
Good
then
to know.
back to calm yeast. So let's say you have, you have it in the back of your fridge or in your root cellar, and you just haven't, noticed there's calm yeast, and you get a fair amount of growth. Well, the calm yeast can bring that pH down, even if it was originally where it needs to be, or I guess pH up. And so um, you can scrape it off and see if everything's fine. But it's always good too, if you're nervous about it or if you don't trust you know your own taste buds around the acidity, is to get those pH strips. And
Mm,
they're real easy to find, and fairly inexpensive, and you just dip one down in there, and you can
yes.
check if that's something that you want to be sure about.
So as long as it's below that secret 4.6 number.
Hmm.
Okay. I will actually link, I'm making myself a note. I will link some pH strips in the description because I know that's something some people are going to be like, what is that? And in fact, I
Yeah.
feel like I should ask you to explain what is comm yeast. We've been talking about it, and I don't think we actually explained what that is to somebody who's never fermented before.
Sure. It's a really common uh, yeast that is a surface yeast that grows on top. It needs oxygen, so it won't go down in, but it can look kind of white. It can get, if it's been in there a while, it can get kind of furry looking. It's just opportunistic. It's like, oh, there's food here. I'm gonna eat it. A lot of people, when they see comm yeast, though, think it's mold because it is white, and it's not. It's not mold. It's fine. It doesn't add flavor. If you see it, get rid of it. If you're making something like a hot sauce and it's a real liquidy ferment, what you might have to do is scrape it off and then continue to stir it daily, because again, it's hard to get it all off. You can't get every microscopic piece of the comm yeast off the top of whatever your ferment is. I mean, if it's sauerkraut, it's pretty easy to get it all off because you just go a little deeper. It's a solid state ferment, but on the
Right.
liquids, it's harder.
Yeah.
And so the next day you might have, the whole top is white again.
Hmm.
So you would take that off again and then just start stirring it a few times a day, and eventually you're going to suffocate it and drown it.
Hmm.
Um,
That's good to know. Okay.
yeah. So it's actually it's more of a pain than anything.
Okay. Um, what about mold? You mentioned that. I know in the book you cover this, but explain to us how we don't need to panic if there is mold and what we can do.
Yeah, mold is, again, it needs oxygen, just like the yeast. And so you just scrape it off the top. I like to go a little bit deeper, usually on something like a pickle, if it's a liquid, in a brine. It will find a piece of vegetable or a piece, it finds something to grow on. So if there's something on, I like to put a leaf or something to help keep all my herbs and spices down under, and definitely to keep the pieces of the vegetables from popping up into the top of the brine, because that's where the mold will grow, is on the top of even a dill seed or something.
Yeah.
And so you scoop that out. And with jams and jellies and things like that, you have to get rid of the whole thing because the mold is a fungus and that hyphae will grow down into it. And
Mm.
you don't really know where that stops. But with that acidic environment, the hyphae can't really grow down in there. And so you just generously scoop it off and you're good to go. And then if, again, trust your senses. If for some reason it smells musty still, if for some reason it tastes musty, then okay, maybe there were air pockets throughout all of my sauerkraut or carrots or whatever it is. And,
Mm-hmm.
maybe this one just goes to the compost or the chickens or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I have followers sometimes send me a picture and they tell me more than once, I've had someone tell me this, that I did both of these jars the same way. Why does this one have mold on the top? This is day 4 or day 6 or whatever. And what did I do differently? How did I mess that up? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, it's not a them thing. It's who knows, what
Yeah.
some like I said with the mold, something was the perfect environment and a little spore from wherever it was floating around landed in that jar but not the other jar, and or found purchase in that jar not the other jar. So it
Mm,
generally it's not something that the human the human did,
okay.
because likely they didn't use one dirty jar and one clean jar.
Right. 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 Um, what about fruits? I know your book is all about vegetables, but you do mention in there that fruits can be a little bit more of a challenge. I love to
Sugar.
ferment. Yeah, I love to ferment blueberries and peaches, and I do that every summer. But I will say it's a very short ferment, like 6 hours that I leave it out, and then I'm putting it in the fridge. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, so all the microbes that ferment love sugar. And so for those that haven't fermented, let's just do a real quick, who are the microbes that ferment? So we've been talking mostly about lactobacillus. Lactobacillus makes acid. It's a bacteria. There are many versions of it, but in simple terms, they eat the starches, the carbohydrates, the sugar. They are responsible for that sour and sourdough bread. They're responsible for yogurt and cheese and pickles and all the things that have that lovely acidity and are preserved through the acidity. They're partly in miso. They're part of charcuterie even. So lactic acid is a real workhorse when it comes to fermentation. Then we have the fungal ferments, which culturally for most of the foods that we've eaten from Western Europe um, aren't as common. But I'm talking about koji and tempeh and things like that. We do have the fungal ferments on certain cheeses, like our bloomy rinded cheeses and things like that. So that's another type of fermentation. And then we have yeast, and yeast loves sugar, and yeast is what is going to be all over those fruits. And so to do a lactic acid ferment on fruit, um, the yeast is going to just usually, you have to look, put a lot of salt in or something, or the yeast will outcompete it. Well, if you're doing peaches, you don't want to like salt the heck out of them. That's
Hmm.
not the goal.
Wouldn't really taste too good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, um, where our lactic acid makes things acidic, yeast makes things alcoholic. So it converts that sugar into alcohol. And so you're going to very quickly get yeasty flavors. And then right after that, you're going to get sort of that first funkiness of alcoholic flavors. And that's kind of the flavor when people put salsa, a fresh salsa in the back of their fridge and they forget about it, or they
Mm,
bring home, in the fall in New England, a freshly pressed apple cider. and they put that in the fridge, and then the jar starts to, swell
Yeah.
up because it's the yeasts have gotten going, and they're creating alcohol. And so with fruit fermentation, especially if you're not trying to create a wine or an alcohol, or a vinegar, you need to, it needs to be very fast, and then you need to put it in the fridge, because what the cold does is it doesn't stop it, but it arrests it. It slows it way down.
Yeah.
And then with fruit, there's things people do to try to make sure that the lactic acid are doing more of the fermentation um, than the yeast. And part of that, one of those things is, of course, adding salt. Other things can be adding, a brine from something else and sort of back slopping so that you're adding a lactic acid population.
Exactly. Since I always have kombucha on hand, I'm using my kombucha to start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I found, using those fruits if they're less ripe is a really good way to do it too,
Oh.
because that yeast is already when those fruits are starting to get really ripe, it's already in there doing its thing. And so if you um, are going to do a fruit that's less ripe, you're going to have a much better chance that it doesn't just get wildly yeasty and alcoholic. I did a peach once where I those peaches were barely ripe, and they actually still got sweet within the ferment, and were really. I did a peach. It was a peach sauerkraut, and it sounds weird, but it worked.
Wow.
But I
Wow.
had to catch those peaches. It was because they were from my tree. I could play with them and catch them at different times and see
Right.
what worked.
Right. Well, that's good to know. Well, now I know what I'm doing this afternoon because I have a box of peaches on my table. I'm going to pick through for the ones that aren't quite ripe for sure and start a ferment. Okay, so this has been fantastic. You are just a wealth of knowledge, and I really am inspired. I mean, that garlic, I'm absolutely doing that too. So before we wrap up, what are the top 3 tips that you would offer to someone who's brand new at fermenting but really wants to give it a try?
um, I think first of all, just don't psych yourself out. Like, it is easy. You can do this. You got this.
Hmm.
um, you're going to be surprised how quick it is. You know, I think so. So I guess the first one is just do it. Don't feel like you need to get any special equipment. Just a jar and, whatever, a cutting board, a knife, and a bowl.
Hmm.
Start with sauerkraut. Even if that's not your favorite food, start with sauerkraut, because there's a reason that people have eaten it for so long. It works. It's
Mm.
easy. It's a good gateway. And you might surprise yourself if you never liked sauerkraut from a jar. You might. It's sort of like the grocery store orange tomato versus the homegrown tomato. It's a whole
Oh,
different
that's a
food.
good comparison, Kirsten. And I can vow to this because I have always said my whole life I hate sauerkraut. I hate it because my parents would buy it, pre-made, and I thought it was disgusting. Well, my daughter taught me otherwise because she started making sauerkraut. She wanted her young daughters to be eating it. She really likes it. I tried it and I went, "Oh my word. This is not sauerkraut. This is actually good." So I am living testament. So, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. You had another tip I'm sure you were going to share.
I think that was it. Start with
Was that it?
sauerkraut.
Okay.
Don't buy anything, and
Okay.
just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, just do it. You know, don't buy the cabbage and put it in the fridge. Buy the cabbage, bring it home, stick it on your counter, and within 5 minutes, literally, you'll have it, you know, cut up, then squish it around with your salt, stuff it in your jar, press out those air bubbles, and then put it on your counter. And then you won't, open your crisper drawer and keep thinking, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do this.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, bring it home,
Yeah.
put it on your cutting board on your counter, and just, do it.
Just do it. Absolutely.
Yes,
And I will say too, what I have found, people that complain about the taste, I feel maybe have let it go too long. Like they ask me, well, how do I know when my ferment's done? And my answer is when you want it to be done, right? You taste it every
totally.
few days. And when it tastes the way you want it, that's when it goes in the fridge. So be in control of the taste too.
Totally. And that's the beauty of all of these vegetables, like if you're, and it doesn't have to be we've talked kind of like pickles and sauerkraut, but I mean, you can ferment any vegetable you want. There is no vegetable that you can't ferment. When I first started fermenting, there was nothing out there. And then slowly we started having this thing called the internet, and I would put in there, can you ferment pumpkin? And of course, nothing came back. And I figured, well, I guess if it doesn't say it'll kill me, I can do it. Well, what I didn't understand is those lactobacillus are on everything. They're equal opportunity starch eaters. They don't care if they're eating pumpkin or cabbage or whatever. They're going to
Mm,
acidify it. Um, anyway, so
good
where I was
point.
going with that is you can ferment any vegetable you want. Start with sauerkraut just because, but if you really still don't like sauerkraut, move on to carrots, move on to something you do love, or
Mhm.
you know, add the ingredient.
Peppers. My
Ex-
family really loves peppers. I think it's one of their favorite things.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
good. And then you can, unlike canning, let's say you're a person who can't eat garlic or doesn't like garlic, you can make a fermented salsa without the garlic, or you can remove the onion entirely, or you can remove
So
the pepper
true.
entirely, and you're
So
not
true.
messing up the recipe. Whereas
Such a
with
good point.
canning, it's like, do not change anything on
Yes.
this recipe,
So
or else it will kill you.
fermenting is for the fun, cool, creative people. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, heck yeah. So my husband likes to when he's on a call or presenting with us, he likes to say, because I'm the one that creates the recipes, and you know I will go with what I have in front of me, because as you know, a garden will give you what it gives you that day. And
Hmm.
so like, you can't wait till you have exactly whatever that amount is. And so I have to, I just make it, um, whatever feels right at that moment. And I might taste as I go and think it needs something else, and you can do that.
Hmm.
And it was a real struggle for me to learn how to, like, write down what I was doing.
It's a problem when you're doing a cookbook about fermenting, right?
Yep. So now I'm really good at that. I do write everything down, even when I'm in
Uh-huh.
test phase or play phase, where I
Yep.
don't, because I used to just play and then I'd realize, oh, I don't know how to recreate that because I
Yep.
didn't write anything down. So,
Yep. So there's tip number 4, right?
right. If you want to repeat it, do write something down, even if
Yes.
it, is barely enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Kirsten, tell everybody where they can find you.
absolutely. So obviously our books are everywhere. We have 5 books. Um, not just vegetables, but also one that's all condiments called Fiery Ferments. Miso Tempe Natto. We have a cider book, and which we're getting into cider season here, and
Yeah.
a vinegar book, because uh, my vinegar chapter was too big and got kicked out of the cider book.
I love it.
um, so yeah, and then I teach classes, online classes at the Fermentation School. It's just fermentationschool.com. And I have a Substack called Fermenting Change at Home with Kirsten K. Shockey. And um, there I mostly tell stories with fermentation mixed in.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Michelle. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, friends. Be sure to go to soulyrested.com/preserve, PRESERVE, to get a link to this book, to get all of my own fermenting recipes, fermented blueberries and fermented peaches. I love them both so much, guys. All of that is at soulyrested.com/preserve. preserve. Also, seriously, this book that the episode was totally based on, it is 80 times more amazing than this episode was. It has quiche recipe and dip recipe and sandwiches and salads. All of these great recipes are using a fermented food ingredient in the recipe. So good for you guys. And they all look so delicious. So go to solarrested.com/preserve and get this book, dive into my own recipes, and find out the tools that I use for fermenting that have made all the difference. solarrested.com/preserve. And remember, guys, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it is a very good life.